Okay, good morning. I guess I'm live. I don't know. Listen, this morning we're only going to cover a couple of verses because change is coming. Okay, change. I grew up as a military brat. And those of you that have grown up with military parents may resonate with what I'm going to share with you. Or perhaps if your parents had to move a lot and you were in one school one year and another school another year, then you kept moving. And the change, you were constantly in flux, always moving, going different places. Well, that's what's going to happen with Jesus here, really quick. It's inevitable that we all go through changes. Life is full of changes. It's full of transition times. And for a variety of different reasons. Obviously, when I had to move, it was because my father was transferred to another base. In fact, it's interesting. I was going back and looking at some of the places I was when I was younger, and I actually found a picture of a school I went to in Puerto Rico with Theodore Roosevelt sitting on he was standing on the very steps that I used to sit on all the time. Maybe I'll post them and let you all see them. Where I spent time as a boy riding horses up and down the mountains, going in the jungles there in Calle in Puerto Rico, and had a boyhood dream there. And so it was interesting. I saw pictures. I even saw the house that I used to live in. And I'll share some pictures on Facebook just so you can see kind of what that was like. But, that was during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and jets were flying over our house. And I remember my dad coming home and saying, hey, pack up, we're leaving today, because they were afraid that Russia was going to start a nuclear war. They were sending nuclear warheads into Cuba. And so the military base that my father was on was pretty much of a top secret base where they trained a lot of kind of espionage, and also did eavesdropping with various satellites and long range antennas. I'll even show you a picture of, they used to make me swear that I would never tell anybody what I saw when I went in the building. I didn't know what I was seeing anyway. But they had computers back then. And this is in 62, 63, 1962, 63. And, the Americans were training for the Bay of Pigs, and big failure there on Kennedy's part to not support the Cubans that had gone back into Cuba to overthrow Castro. And many of them were killed, many of them tortured, many of them put in prison. So it's kind of an environment that I was in as a little boy, and then we had to leave. So transitions come. Sometimes they're planned. Sometimes they're not planned. Sometimes they come because your spouse walked out on you for divorce. You didn't see it coming. They're gone. Now what are you going to do? And it may come because of health reasons. A friend that I play golf with had a heart attack, so he's not playing anymore. Another one who I've been telling for years to quit smoking had lung cancer. And so it can come from a variety of reasons. You look in the Old Testament and you see Moses had to transition from being treated as a son of Pharaoh to being an outcast because he killed one of Pharaoh's servants. And man, he's taken off. He had to transition. You see David transitioning when Saul was chasing him, trying to kill him. You see Abraham when God told him to pick up, hey, I'm going to take you somewhere where you don't know. And even Sarah, who didn't question, or didn't refuse to go with Abraham when God took him to a land that he hadn't been to before. Even Lot had to leave as God got ready to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, at times when you go, you shouldn't look back like Lot's wife did. She turned into a pillar of salt. Okay, so sometimes when we leave, and it's hard to do. I remember we had good friends, and then as soon as you're making good friends, you got to go. And sometimes, until the internet came, I lost track with all my schoolmates and all that until the internet came in. Now they got on Facebook here, they got alumni sites for many of the schools that I went to. In fact, I just had a friend that I traveled with to Germany, to Rome. When we were teenagers, we played football together. We did a lot of things together. We went spearfishing together, and he went and had surgery on a hip replacement, and he didn't make it. He died right afterwards with complications. Transitions come. They come for a variety of different reasons. And Jesus is about to make a transition. You go back all through the Bible, through the Old Testament to the New Testament, and you see major transitions. You see the transition of Adam and Eve going from the garden to being cast out. You see then the establishment of a people without any written law and then all the people were so wicked that God decided to flood the whole earth and put a rainbow in the sky to remind them not to do that again, or he would do that today. Then you see him begin to work with Abraham, the patriarchs, and he began a nation of Israel to work with. But he wanted to serve them as under a theocracy. A theocracy means that he was going to be their king. But they didn't like that idea. They demanded that God give them a human king. So God gave them Saul, but he warned them that that would bring a lot of negative consequences, and they didn't listen to him. So eventually God found a man after his own heart, David. And that went along pretty good until David fell into sin. And he committed adultery and murder, and the nation eventually became divided. And Israel, for many, many years, kept going into idolatry. God sends them into captivity. He brings them back. He sends all kind of prophets to bring them back home. And both major and minor, finally he says, hey, I've had enough of this. And he just quit talking to them until John the Baptist came on the scene. And Jesus is now going to give a last call to the nation of Israel. And so he performs all these miracles here we see in the Gospel of John, 7 miracles that hadn't been done, to confirm the fact that he was in fact the Christ, the Savior, the one that was going to give his life for the whole world. But the nation of Israel, especially the religious leaders, rejected him. In fact, they got so bad that they even told Jesus, you know, the only reason you're able to perform all these miracles is because you're empowered by the devil himself. Can you imagine saying that to the Lord? And someday you're going to have to give an account to that when you stand before him someday. And so finally, Jesus had enough. The time has come. He's done his about 3-year ministry, public ministry. The time has come to transition. Okay? Mary had already anointed his feet, preparing him for burial. In Bethany, he had already raised Lazarus from the dead. And now we have come to John chapter 12, verse 20 to 23. We're only going to cover 3 verses because I want to make a point here. Okay? Okay, let me read these to you. Now, in verse 20. An interesting development is going to happen here. Now, there were some Greeks, pay very close attention to that word. There were some Greeks, they were not Jewish, who went up to worship at the feast. That's a Passover feast that was going to be happening in Jerusalem. And they happened to come to Philip, one of Jesus' disciples, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request. Okay? And they said to Philip, Sir, we would like to see Jesus. And Philip went to tell Andrew, and Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. Jesus is going to transition from working with just the Jewish people to now prepare his disciples for a new development called the church. Instead of just Jews, it's also going to be Jews and Gentiles. Okay? And so he says, and as you can see, he says, Jesus replied when they put this request to him. We don't know whether they actually granted him an audience or not. But listen to Jesus' response when they asked him if Jesus could meet with these Greeks. And Jesus replied, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Okay? And we're going to pick up on that passage in my next message, and I'm going to explain all that. But he says, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. So if you can picture in the scene of a condemned man on death row, and the hour has come to take him to the electric chair. He knows he's going to die. Jesus knew he was going to die. And he says the hour has come. When the condemned man on death row goes to the electric chair to die, he's going to die for his sins. And rightfully so. Okay. But when Jesus goes to the cross and dies, he's not dying for his sin because he was sinless. He's going to die for the sins of the whole world. And he's going to make a point in the next passages where he says, unless something dies, there cannot be life. But in this case, the condemned man is going to die, and die is going to take him to eternal death, separation from God. Whereas when Jesus died, it's going to bring the possibility of eternal life for humanity, for all those that put their trust in him. Jesus is going to go through a major transition here. In fact, it's going to fulfill his purpose in coming, which he says, I didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. What is a ransom? It's to purchase you back, to buy from you. In a lot of ways, it's sad because Jesus had all these expectations for Israel, for the Jewish people, and the majority of them utterly let him down. They wanted Jesus not for a relationship with them, but what Jesus could give for them. They were never satisfied. And they never accepted Jesus as the Christ, the Son of God, and the one that was going to die for their sins. We all go through transitions. The biggest transition I ever went to is when I went from death to life, and I got born again. And that gave me a whole new purpose, a whole new direction that I never had before. And since I've been a Christian, I have gone through many other transitions. I'm about to go through one now. You know, from being in this particular location to another, and I don't know where. But I'm willing to say, God, wherever you want me to go, I'm going to go because that's where I know you have it best for me, and the same is true with you. Transitions aren't bad. Okay? They're necessary in order to grow. Without trials, without change, you just don't grow. You become stagnant. You get stuck in a rut. Okay? And then when you're stuck in a rut, you begin to rot. And I've gone through a lot of different changes, some that I brought on myself, others that others brought on to me, others that God allowed to happen, others that God decreed to happen. And I have to be willing and ready to make a change. And the disciples are no different. And they're going to be perplexed completely, especially as Jesus is going to get arrested, taken to the cross, and crucified, and then buried in a tomb. And the disciples had just been spent 3 years with the Lord, are wondering, now what? God's about to take them on the greatest adventures of their lives. They didn't have a clue. And that's what he wants to do with you and I, if we'll trust him. God bless you all today.